Everyone, we're ready to move to our next session of the departmental showcase. We're going to pick up this section with a panel conversation titled Food Systems, Health and Society 2050. My name is Craig Hassel and I'm a faculty member in our department, and I will facilitate our conversation for the next half hour. I'm going to introduce Keagan to my far right and George, who's in the middle, in a moment. But I want to let you know that each of the three of us as panelists have engaged in a personal journey that informs our work, in addition to the more common forms of professional development that are so often given attention within our academic environments. So you're going to hear us speak about how our personal growth informs our work and our perspectives as professionals in science and active members of society as we move ahead towards the year 2050. The title of our session, Food Systems, Health and Society 2050, gives us a broad frame, and we hope to inspire students to develop themselves as human beings in the 21st century that both complements and enhances their professional development. After all, we all became human beings long before we became scientific professionals. Dr. Keagan Ringling is a recent PhD graduate. He was in our Department of Food Science and Nutrition, and he majored in nutrition science, graduating just this past August. His interdisciplinary graduate program incorporated agricultural science, food and nutrition science, and applied economics to develop new sustainable crops for food use. Keagan, as I read the breadth of your experience, I recall my own experience in 1986 when I was minted as a PhD, and the idea then was to become very narrow and to find a niche, a little micro world where we could be the expert. And it seems you've run a little bit counter to that, so we'll be interested in hearing from you. Dr. George Annor is an assistant professor of serial chemistry and technology. He's also chair for the General Mills Endowed Professorship. And he is a native of Ghana in West Africa and obtained his PhD in food science at the University of Guelph. He's currently president of the Minnesota section of the Institute of Food Technology. We use the acronym IFT quite commonly in our department. Dr. Annor is part of the Forever Green Initiative, actively working on environmentally friendly and sustainable crops. He joined the university in 2016. He's happy to be a part of the showcase, and we're very happy to have George as a part of our department. You're very well liked and appreciated.
Thank you.
As for my own work, I use the term cross-cultural engagement, work that is grounded in long-term relationships with cultural communities, struggling to revitalize cultural food practices as a means to create health. I do not intervene, but rather interface with systems of thought carried by older, non-Euro-American cultures. I hope to create paths to more open and informed intercultural sharing in my work, interaction, and knowledge production. I'm also a fellow in the Cultural Wellness Center. We'll hear more about the Cultural Wellness Center later on today, and I've studied there for over 15 years. So we'll begin with a food systems question. Keagan, how do you see the food systems changing, and how might we get ahead of the curve of change? Sure. Oh.
Sure, thank you, Therese, and thank you, Craig, for the excellent introduction and for the excellent question. Now, when I think about how the food system is going to change in the future, I'm really sort of reminded of the title of our showcase, which is something to the effect of Food, Health, and Society for 2050. And that really reminds me of a term that was actually coined by one of our colleagues at the University of Minnesota, David Tillman, and some of his graduate students. I think Michael Clark is the other person on the paper, which is the food, diet, health trilemma. And basically, this food, diet, health trilemma is the idea that by 2050, we're going to have something somewhere between 9 and 10 billion people. And we need to think of a way to sustainably feed this growing population in a way that preserves the integrity of the natural environment, while also optimizing human health. So we've got the environmental element to that. We also have the health element to that. And to make things even more complicated, these things need to really contribute to the societal well-being and the cultural well-being of the population. And they also need to be economically sound and resilient. So clearly there's sort of this four-pronged axis of the food, diet, health, environment trilemma. And this is really a wicked problem. And I think that it's our responsibility as food and nutrition professionals looking to address this problem to really integrate with the agricultural sciences. So Craig, you're talking about when you were a newly minted PhD, you were sort of asked to really drill down and to focus on your one thing and become more and more siloed. I think as this food system is changing and as sustainability becomes a bigger and bigger issue that we're asked to address, we need to break down those silos and work across differences and really become more integrated throughout the food system and throughout the supply chain to really develop more holistic, integrated approaches when thinking about developing foods. And that's actually why I chose to pursue a more interdisciplinary path through my graduate education. I really wanted to work on something that could really be viewed as a food for the future that could contribute to the environmental health of our planet, but that could also be an equitable food source and could also contribute positively, potentially, to the food system and be economically sound. So I think those approaches are going to become more and more important as we move forward, as we move towards this sort of ominous 2050 year. And I think there's quite a few examples of our department is really starting to shift in that direction. George mentioned the Forever Green initiative, which is also where a lot of my work was based. But we're seeing folks like George and George's lab collaborating with plant geneticists, looking at how to make, for example, wheat more healthful or more friendly on the gut, for example. We're also seeing folks like Dr. Ismail's lab really working on plant-based protein sources, which have really been positioned as something that's environmentally friendly. So I think these approaches are going to become more and more important as we press forward to address this changing food system.
Thank you, Keagan. George, you're a fairly new faculty member to the department here. I'm just wondering how you feel about the food system. Do you see the same things that Keagan is seeing, and how do you think things are going to change?
Thank you. Is my microphone working? Yeah. I'd say I'm very happy to be part of the department. As you said, joined in 2016, and I think the department is very vibrant and well positioned to solve some of the changes that I see in food systems. I'll start by saying food systems, mainly simply put, are all the processes and infrastructure that are needed to feed a particular population. So you're looking at agriculture, you're looking at food scientists, you're looking at people in nutrition, all being involved. How is it changing? It is changing in a lot of ways. I won't go too far. Just with this pandemic that we had recently, we know for a fact that people who were infected with the COVID even have changes in their taste perception. even changes in the how they smell food, right? This is changing. The food systems can also be changed by demographics. We have a lot of urbanization. People are moving to the city centers. It is changing how people eat. It is changing how they cook. Now, it has also become clear that this COVID has actually made people want to cook more at home, right? So this all goes back to affect how food is going to be processed, how food is going to be packaged, how food is going to be presented to consumers. There's also a lot about income. As people get more money, their lifestyles changes, what they eat changes. Now, there's also recently been an increase in the demand of plant protein foods, and Keagan just mentioned that our department is well poised to kind of deal with a situation like this. So we have the Plant Protein and Innovation Center. There's also been a lot of demand for sustainable crops. People want crops that are environmentally friendly. This is where the Forever Green initiative also comes in. And the department is playing an active role in making sure we have crops that are sustainable, that are also very healthy, right? We have a department that is food science and nutrition, right? So we shouldn't leave the nutrition part behind. We have the dietetics program that is actually dealing with the effect of diet, our diet on our health. And I think some of these changes are happening, but I think the department is well poised with the faculty we have, with the experience we have, with the leadership we have, and even the students, the graduate students, the undergraduate students. I think we are well poised to deal with some of these changes that we're seeing now.
Thank you, George. One thing that you did mention that, or you talked about food systems, but I want to also bring up a cultural dimension to food, because culture is so important, and food practices, food preparation, culinary skills, even our industry are a function of culture and the values and priorities within a cultural context. And I think as we interact with different cultural contexts, as our demographics come together and we have this intercultural interaction, I think responding to food within a cultural context is also going to be very significant. And I think that's something fairly new to our disciplines, really, developing a cultural lens, understanding foods and food preferences within a cultural context, not just an individual taste and preference context. So I think all of these are part of a larger systemic look at our food system. Yeah. And I think given our unique local and regional context, most of our land grant peer departments are not in major urban metropolitan areas. We're fairly unique in that way. I'm going to ask Keagan, what future leadership opportunities do you see for our department from your perspective as a newly minted PhD?
Sure. So Craig, I think you brought up an exceptional point in that our land grant university is really positioned in a unique spot for two different reasons. We can think of the Twin Cities as really being something of a food hub, really for the whole country. We're surrounded by large businesses and Fortune 500 companies in the food industry. And that's something that's really, really unique. The other unique situation with our positioning is that we're in also something of a cultural hub. I don't know the exact number, but there are something like hundreds of different languages spoken throughout the metro area from cultures all over the world. So we're really in a unique position to get to interact with those folks and those cultures and really understand more about how we can better serve that community. And I think that's a really unique position for a food science nutrition department to really get ahead of the curve on something like that. Another thing that I think is really unique about our department and about the College of Food, Ag, and Natural Resource Sciences is that we really cover the entire sort of food system, all the way from plant genetics and agronomy to food science, nutrition, of course, but also things like natural resource and conservation sciences and biological systems engineering, and all of these different elements. And really, I see an opportunity for our department to be kind of almost a clearinghouse or a nexus for all of those different departments to come together and to look at a lot of these systemic issues that we discussed in the previous question.
Great, thank you. George, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I think what I would like to add is more of a top up to what you said about the cultural aspect of food systems. And I think coming since I joined the department, I've seen a lot of effort being made in that aspect, reaching out to native populations and trying to figure out how we can help them get nutritious foods. Myself and Craig, we visited a place where we had to help the natives kind of figure out how to take their product to the market, but not process it the way everyday food is processed in a grocery store. I thought it was very, very, very important. And we have a saying that you are what you eat. In Ghana, for instance, where I come from, different cultures have their unique foods. And I think I see the department playing an important role to serve the general population, have foods that are available to everybody else, but also have foods that are tailored to some of these different populations. Minnesota has a lot of people from different countries. When I was doing my PhD at the University of Guelph, I would say compared to when I moved to Minnesota, I feel that I have access to a lot more foods that I would typically eat in Ghana compared to when I was in Guelph. And when I see all this, I think the department is in a very unique position to reach out to all these individual populations to kind of figure out how they can get access to quality and healthy foods.
Great. Yes, our state grain here in Minnesota is wild rice. And the Anishinaabe people of northern Minnesota maintain a sacred relationship with the rice. They call it the monomen. And how do we in food science and nutrition maintain that sacred relationship as we work with communities to help develop different products or even bring different technologies to food? How do we make sure that we aren't engaging in something that would compromise that spiritual value that actually is so important to the health of communities? I've had an elder tell me, Craig, you can study that wild rice all you want in the laboratory, you'll never understand why it's so important to the health of our people. And so there are these broader dimensions within our discipline that we really haven't paid that much attention to. And I think as we try to address some of these challenges, it necessitates us thinking a little bit more broadly about how we go about our work.
Yeah, and maybe just to add to what you said, not necessarily on the cultural aspect, I also think one area the department can actually take leadership in is this whole idea of people wanting to understand how what they eat affect their, what we call microbiome, right? So it is becoming an emerging area now, and I see the department in a very unique position to collaborate with geneticists to kind of look deeply into this whole phenomenon about, okay, if I eat wild rice versus if I eat white rice, how does it change my intestinal microflora? I don't want to use too big words, but how does it change you as an individual? We know their effects. And I think the department has a very unique position to collaborate with other scientists to kind of lead in that area as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's an excellent point, George. And one of the underlying cultural assumptions we have in our institutions is that our research is curiosity driven. And so if we're curious about something and we can get funding, it's quite okay to just go ahead and investigate it. But there may be communities that would say, well, we don't think that's appropriate. We think that that should be held off limits, or we think we should proceed with caution here before we march ahead with these things. And I just wonder, with some of these paradigm shifts that we're talking about, the extent to which we're truly willing to listen to communities, especially if there are financial implications on the line. And of course, we know how we're rewarded in these institutions. And I think maybe these paradigm shifts that we're talking about require a closer examination of some of these larger structural issues within our institutions. Keagan, when you look ahead and you look at the national and international scope, what opportunities do you see for us here at the University of Minnesota?
Sure. And I just want to go back to the last discussion just for 1 second,
Sure.
Craig, because I think you brought up a really, really good point, and something that I heard while I was at the university, actually as an undergraduate. I have the distinction of being a double gopher. But while I was an undergraduate, a phrase that came up was seek first to understand and seek second to be understood. And I think you bring up a really, really good point with understanding the cultural context within which our science lands in the community. And it's I think, our duty is to really understand how the community feels about these things that we're working with, and what is acceptable or not acceptable, and more importantly, why are they not acceptable, or why are they acceptable? And I think that's a way that we can really work to improve our efficacy as scientists. In terms of looking at national, international leadership, I think developing students with that capacity to seek first to understand could really set us apart as an institution. So having that ability, but then also having this ability to work across systems, work across these silos, to really take a more holistic approach to developing foods that contribute to our health and our environment, our societies and cultures, and that also remain economically feasible.
Great. George, you do a lot of international work. What opportunities do you really see for us moving ahead?
I think the department is in a very unique position to take leadership in the areas of sustainability, like sustainable crops, or sustainable foods made from sustainable crops. And I'm saying this because we already have a system going. We already have programs like the Forever Green Initiative that the department is actually a part of. And anytime you travel and you tell people that you are working on this perennial grain, people become excited. You know, like, we want to know about this grain. We want to know about that. I was last year in Guatemala working on this Ramon nut. So I'm a cereal chemist, but of course I'm a food scientist in general. So this Ramon nut is a forest crop that provides food for the communities the communities where they grow. So they provide resources for the forest. They are sustainable. They have these nuts that will fall to the ground, and the natives will collect them and process them. I am part of this team that are trying to figure out how to get this into our mainstream food systems. Again, sustainability. That is what I think the department, we already have a program going. I think if we keep at it, it will be an area where the department would also be known for. We also have the Plant Protein Center that is already working extremely hard. I mean, they're doing really very well. These two areas are the areas that I see the department really taking a lead in the international world, because we already have these programs going. I think if we put a lot more effort into it, that was going to be a unique opportunity for the department.
Great. Great, I appreciate that. You know, as I'm listening to both of you, I know that there are cultural communities who are very interested in doing food system work. For example, indigenous communities use the term food sovereignty and re-indigenizing our food system. And they're thinking about creating their own smaller food systems in parallel rather than attempting to create change within the monolithic food system that tends to be predominant. I'm just wondering if either one of you would care to comment on the viability or the practicality of that approach, or is that something that will lead to a better future? Or is that something you think is going to meet with too many challenges? What are your thoughts?
If I could go there, yeah, I think it is difficult to do, but it is still practical. I mean, if we are pushed by the idea that these communities really value food more than just providing nutrients to them, that should be kind of like a driving force to help these communities still keep their food sovereignty, right? To help these communities still have access to their foods. We should rather help these communities to take their food and make it healthier without changing it significantly. Otherwise, then it loses its significance to them. It can be done. It is difficult, but I think the department can help in that aspect. And I mean, here in Minnesota, we have a clear example with the indigenous population, the native Indians, where wild rice is a very good example. I mean, we can help them take wild rice to where they want it to be and still let them feel like it still has the relevance that it had as a sacred crop to them, rather than seeing it being changed or destroyed or being processed just like any other food.
Thank you. Keagan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think it's possible, and I definitely think that there's room at the table for all of these kinds of approaches. And I think we don't even have to look too far to already see some incredible things being done in this space. For example, there's a lot of great work being done right now at the Midtown Global Market in partnership with the Cultural Wellness Center, and a few of our students and faculty are working really hard in that space to work with some of these indigenous communities and some of these diverse cultures to really help to empower them and to be a resource to them to land some ancient grains into their food system. And I think it's an exciting space to be in.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we'll hear more about that work at the Spotlight at 4 o'clock. But right now our time is coming to a close, and of course we're going to be followed by the president of our university, so we don't want to take any of her precious time. So I just want to take a moment to thank you both and to thank everyone who's here, members of our advisory council. We really appreciate you showing up in person. And thank you all very much out there watching virtually. We look forward to working with all of you in the future. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Are you doing your introduction from here? Yes, you all see the game. How do I know then? So I'd like to welcome you to the Food Science and Nutrition Showcase 2020, following a great session with our students opening the two-day showcase this morning. An insightful panel discussion about food, health and society by faculty members and graduate students from the program. And I'm truly honored to welcome President Gabel to our showcase. That she has accepted our invitation to be in our midst in this important meeting for our department. And we invited President Gabel to talk about her vision for the University of Minnesota as one of the premier land-grant universities in the nation. And specifically, given the orientation that we have in our department on food science, on nutrition, on dietetics, on the food system, I asked President Gabel to reflect for her vision on food, health, and the environment in 2050 to actually resonate also with the overarching theme of our showcase. And I don't want to take up more of her precious time, and I really like to welcome on behalf of all our students, staff, and faculty at the Food Science and Nutrition Department, President Gabel. Could I give the floor to you? Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I'm honored to receive the invitation, and I'm grateful for everybody's time. I know that whenever we pause and come together and have the chance to visit like this, that everyone has choices, especially now around different things they could be doing. And so I'm very honored to be invited and have a chance to share some of the things that we're working on and thinking, and then that gives you all an opportunity to provide feedback, if not immediately during the course of our time together, then certainly follow up if there's something you hear that...
President Gabel, we have an issue with the sound connection. We can see you, but we can't hear you. The technical staff is trying to address it. Okay, so I think, what's the suggestion I'm getting from the...
Do you want me to say something?
Okay, so I would invite President Gabel to continue.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, very well. President Gabel, welcome. We're great to hear you.
Okay, so everyone listening online could hear me, and they will tell you that everything I said was amazing.
Oh, great. Thank you.
To that point. So just briefly offering thanks and appreciation for being here and inviting feedback, because much of what we'll be talking about is now reflected in a recently approved by the Board of Regents strategic plan. And my hope is that what you hear will show a lot of intersection, both substantively in the areas of emphasis that you just described for the work that you're doing, but also more broadly as we talk about things like understanding and collaboration with our tribal community partners, or other ways in which we're equitable and inclusive, ways in which we try to steward resources well in related areas to your work. So there may not be time for feedback today, but you all know how to get a hold of me, and I invite that for future collaboration. So I'm glad to be able to do this remotely too. I know we're all figuring out ways to continue conversations and think about how we work together and inspire each other's curiosity and other ways in which we get better together. And so as much as I hate it, here we are on Zoom, able to be together. Last year, this time I was in Duluth for part of my inauguration. So it is just as a sense of, it's only been a little more than a year, and yet it feels like quite a bit longer than that, doesn't it? I think for all of us since this time last year, it just feels like a different time. And while the pandemic, is a challenge that none of us in our lifetimes faced or expected, I do think that despite the fact and with full appreciation for the fact that a lot of people are really suffering and that this impacts a lot of communities, exposes a lot of vulnerability that I think we have a real responsibility to pay attention to. There have also been some incredible innovations and opportunity for good work for the way in which the university can be an overall part of betterment in every way that we might define that word, you know, student instruction, the way in which it frames our research questions, the way in which those research questions are contextualized around our community, neighbor, and partner expectations. I heard the panel talking about that before I joined in and was really delighted and interested in their exploration there too. I know it's not part of the vision, but just while I have this group, I do want to spend a few minutes talking about decisions around the pandemic, because I know that you all are living it in very specific ways and we don't always have the opportunity for this kind of sharing. But the leadership team that was pulled together to make the operational decisions around the pandemic was absolutely focused first and foremost on safety, obviously, as we all must be as we make our own personal decisions or decisions for our families and then decisions for the institution, but safety in the context of mission, that we had the two sort of parallel values that we were making all decisions off of. One is that we should be as safe as any place else. We shouldn't do things that in any way create new risk or additional risk. If anything, we should be mitigating risk, but also that we were better as an institution if we were able to do the things that are mission driven, land grant and otherwise. I mean, always anchored in the land grant mission, but some of the research and teaching that we do even beyond that, and service that we do even beyond that, but certainly inspired by that mission. And so the cornerstone of the land grant mission around, you know, elevating and originally in agriculture and the mechanical arts, but obviously with a broadened context today, that mission is part of what we should be trying to do even now, especially now, but safely. So we've used all of the science as it's known around creating environments where we can function safely. And I see you all doing it now. You're sitting 6 feet away from each other. You're wearing your masks. We can do some things together despite some of the risks of the pandemic, or at least with an understanding of some of the risks of the pandemic. But also we have had a really deepened appreciation for individual flexibility. I think higher ed has always had a lot of individuality, and that's part of the magic in how we do our work, but the idea that people need to be able to make their own choices. So as much as possible while continuing to operate, we've really tried to give everyone individual choices around what they're comfortable with in how they pursue their work or their learning or their service. And we're very grateful for how people have approached that. There is a lot of pivoting. We've been calling them graceful pivots, some more graceful than others. The information changes rapidly. We've started off in a very reactive mode. We're slowly migrating towards proactive mode, things like spring semester planning happening now as opposed to, you know, day of, as sometimes the facts unfortunately required in order for us to strike that balance between safety, mission, and flexibility. But we're getting better and better at coping, and I think we'll get it just right when the vaccine is widely available. That is my expectation around how all of this will likely work. But with a great appreciation and thanks to everyone for how hard everyone's working, for the commitment to quality, for the commitment to respect, for the fact that people need to do this in different ways and yet have pulled together as a community at the same time. It is absolutely apparent to everyone how that's happening in an individual way, and then how that creates a collective community of which I am very, very proud to be a small part. So I'm very grateful for all of that, grateful for the kindness, grateful for the support. I do want to remind everyone, because it makes me feel better, so I'll just share this, that while I don't think any of us were alive in 1918, we have been through epidemic before. Many of you study the effects of disease and understand this better, but just from a little sort of reality check point of view, during that epidemic and then the polio outbreak a couple of decades, 3 decades actually later, we had delayed classes, the state fair was canceled. A lot of the things that we held near and dear then and hold near and dear now were affected, and we got back to business. We will get back to business now. And in many ways, the lessons of those times informed very good decisions in progress. And I really believe that will be the case here, not only in our research and discovery and in our service in that type of discovery, but also in the flexibility that we've come to embrace that we didn't have before, how we think about how we work together, what it means to uplift each other, what it means to inspire each other. So a lot of this is captured in the strategic plan. And I know we have differences of opinion about the values of strategic planning. The board wanted a strategic plan, and in my history, professionally, I have found them, when done well, when developed through consultative processes, when set up in ways that have feedback loops, they can accomplish 3 things for a community, and others, but at least these 3 things. One is they give a structure, sort of an architecture for telling the story about what the university is about, that we embrace people doing with respect to their specific work or their specific expertise, disciplinary focus or programmatic focus, but that we often suffer a capacity to talk about collectively by virtue of the breadth of our individual efforts. And a system-wide strategic plan, and it's our first one, gives us a place from which to talk about what it is that we do, what we would lose if we went away, what we are aspiring to contribute across the research, teaching, service, mission-based landscape. It gives us a source of inspiration, not the only source, but it is a spine off of which a lot of our inspiration can flow. These are the things that we are prioritizing. They're exciting, they mean something, that we do them well, they improve our community, they improve science, they improve the arts, they give our students opportunities, they give our state opportunities, and in the inspiration that this incredible state offers, we have global impact. And it can also create accountability. And in this case, I want to be very clear. I don't mean like a weaponized accountability. I mean a sense that we've said we want to accomplish something, are we? And asking ourselves that question and being transparent about our progress towards what it is we hope to do or hope to be. And so it's in that spirit that we developed the strategic plan. The strategic plan is anchored in 5 commitments. And we chose the word commitment not just because it's strategic planning speak, although it kind of is, but because commitments reflect an intersection between values and action. And I think that that is really aligned with being a land-grant institution and also being a system as opposed to a specific single campus, that we have values. They were the reason we were founded, but we, in order to fulfill our mission as a land-grant institution and as a statewide system, have to act on them, because the point is to elevate and provide opportunity and engage in discovery that provides that opportunity. So we looked for more than just value statements, as important as they are, but value statements that are applied, and then how and in which way we would act upon them. So our commitments are to students and student success. We have a commitment to discovery, innovation. We have a commitment that we call Mintersections. I'll come back to that. That one requires some explanation. We have a commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we have a commitment to being good stewards of our resources as a public institution. And those should not sound surprising or particularly unique, actually, in their foundational level, in the 2-dimensionality of describing them, with the exception of Mintersections. And that is to some degree by design, that where we find our distinction is in how we fulfill those commitments, what we prioritize within those commitments, how we measure and hold ourselves accountable, or how we inspire others within the space of those commitments. And that is how we really think about strategic planning in the context of the land-grant mission. I want to talk specifically, though, about the Mintersections commitment. So by virtue of having been a dean and a provost in past lives, and I know there are other administrators in the room, lots and lots of strategic plans over the years. And some of them were really robust and became a part of the culture, and some of them were a document that got dusty in the back of a drawer. And all of them, almost all of them anyway, if you put your hand over the logo on the front page, looked exactly alike. And we do that sometimes in higher ed, because so much of what we do is peer reviewed and best practice, and we assess each other against what others are doing, and that is how we anchor in the quality of our science, and it's how we compete for resources, and there's real value in operating that way, but it also incentivizes a peer-to-peer mindset, and so strategic plans often look very much like each other. And that's okay, it's not harmful, but it isn't necessarily taking advantage of the opportunity either. And we really wanted to both anchor in legacy and tradition, and the fact that we do care about student success and discovery and innovation, and we do care deeply about equity, and we care about being public and stewarding our resources well. But what did it mean to be the University of Minnesota? And how did we strike the balance that I personally feel, as still a new arrival to this community, that we strike uniquely well, really distinctively well, between understanding our sense of place and feeling our commitment to this state and this place, but at world-class levels. And that those two, that there's a tension between the domestic nature of our Minnesota-inspired work and the origins of the land-grant mission, and our global world-class quality and status and expectation and partners and learnings and research opportunities and instructional opportunities. And I think that while it is a tension and it does require sort of a curation, we do have a unique coexistence between that sense of place and our global stature and impact. And I wanted to capture that. We wanted to capture that in the strategic plan. So Mintersections, the commitment to a Mintersection, and you know, we have to have a little MN in there because it is, you know, Minnesota, but the commitment there is to be inspired by the state, but to act upon that inspiration at world-class levels and look for the unique and robust opportunities or challenges that the state poses, that we are in a unique position to solve or mitigate or elevate or advance, as the case may be, for when it's opportunistic to do so. So the expectation is that over the arc of the strategic plan, that the Mintersection areas of emphasis may change and evolve, but the three that we're starting with are health, sustainability, and agri-food. So those should probably sound pretty familiar to you. I would suspect for this audience that these resonate with you, and that is by design. And the good news is that when we talk about this with lots of different audiences around the university, they resonate there too. Even with audiences who don't necessarily have this as the primary function of their scholarship or their program of study, there's an understanding that those areas are active in this state in ways that are distinctive in this state, and that we as a university system have deep expertise from multiple perspectives and points of view, both in our own expertise amongst the faculty and staff, but also in who we are able to partner with and who we have around the table with us. And so our Mintersections and our commitment to be in service to and inspired by our state, but at world-class quality levels, is focused on those three areas. How those areas, what those areas mean, how we act upon them, there's a spectrum underneath each one. I would think of them as umbrellas under which I would expect there to be a very wide range of activities. So under health, we look at how we prepare clinicians. Obviously, there's the instructional side through the partnership that we have with hospital systems. There is the delivery model question. There is the typical innovation. Well, I don't know, typical innovation is a bit of an oxymoron, but there's the traditional area of study around innovations in cures and medical solutions. There's our medtech enterprise, but these are blurry lines because they bleed directly into a discussion of agri-food, as I was listening to and have heard many of you say one-on-one, that if we are developing our food sources in ways that are healthy and nutritious, then that of course feeds into the health innovation in our area of excellence. If we are developing food in ways that are conscious of the environment, not just from a sustainability and environmentalism point of view, but in terms of who we share the environment with and their ancient wisdom. As we talk about things like tribal partners or other partners, techniques and methodologies that our international partners bring, what it means to lift people up by virtue of their food security, what that means for our national security. It all should intersect and have blurry lines. These are not intended to be silos. They're intended to be placeholders of something that's beautifully amorphous and reflects the unique expertise and passion, curiosity, and community engagement of our faculty, staff, and students. So just some examples of what this means and some of the unique ways that this creates. Some of you may be familiar with an initiative that we're involved in very actively called MBOLD, which is relatively, it sort of took 7 years to become an overnight sensation, kind of an activity that was emerging really gradually and incrementally up through greater MSP, which is a business partnership, but that the university is very involved in, but reflects within that partnership the very wide spectrum of agribusiness that we do in the state of Minnesota, you know, from the soil to the table and everything in between. And how if we don't have the ability, or if we don't take advantage of our ability to bring the farmer and the environmentalist and the entrepreneur around the table, then if we look at, you know, crop cover technology and don't incentivize the farmer to use it and don't think about what that means for when that comes forward to the marketplace, then things don't become sustainable, either from a social sustainability and environmental sustainability or a commercial sustainability point of view. And so we're invited to and happily actively participate in this initiative, along with commercial partners, along with various representatives from the agriculture sector, along with advocates around climate emergency and climate change, along with tribal partners, et cetera. And it gives me optimism that the rest of the world would then recognize at that world quality, global impact level, what we are able to do uniquely by virtue of simply who is here in the state of Minnesota and what we bring to the table, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended. So, so that's just one example of the kinds of things that we choose to then invest our time and some of our resources in and participate in, because it reflects our unique capacity as captured by the Mintersections portion of the strategic plan. So a couple of other things I want to make you aware of that are not directly related to the subject of your time together today, but are part of our work that may be of interest to you and may have indirect relationship. And also, just while I have you, I want to make you aware of. So as part of the strategic plan, we make a commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion. Within that commitment is our commitment to being essentially a good neighbor. In general, understanding our public history is part of that. Commitment to tribal partners is part of that specifically, and also a commitment to safety. And safety is intentionally multifaceted. So it refers to safety in the sense of, you know, reducing crime. I would call that a traditional definition, but it also refers to safety in the sense of feeling safe and how that can vary according to your life experience and perspective, which can come about and emerge from a variety of different points of view. So with regard to safety, we have brought on an outside expert, Dr. Cedric Alexander. You may have seen me mention him in emails, and I know I send a lot of emails these days and they are long, but when you can't sleep one night, just buzz through all of them and you'll know about everything going on. But Dr. Alexander is both a former police chief and a PhD in psychology with vast experience, really uniquely vast experience in community engagement, particularly post-unrest as communities seek to heal. And we have asked him, we've retained him to help advise us around our own commitment to safety, multifaceted safety. And I've asked him to come and have hired him to consult with us, not because I in any way have a bad opinion of our own UMPD police department. I don't. Actually, I think they're really excellent community campus policing agency, but with a reflection that we can still improve and that we're a university and we should always be trying to improve. And our students, some of our students have asked us to look at this from both points of view, either because with the national uptick in some areas of crime, they don't feel safe, or because they have feelings about policing, they don't feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, we should be addressing that. So he's here to help us as a community think about what that might be in the spirit of continuous improvement. He just was here this week. He actually came physically, which was nice, and felt comfortable doing so, which was also fine and nice. And he met with some people in person and some people by Zoom, and we'll have feedback loops. This is an ongoing process, but I did want you to be aware it was happening. Another thing I want to make you aware of is many of you will recall now almost 2 years ago, the board was asked to consider the renaming of 4 buildings after a robust and much appreciated effort by a group of our faculty and some staff and students on the history of the institution, and of the particular people who we have honored with namings. And for those of you who may not recall, the board declined to rename those buildings and instead charged the administration, which very shortly thereafter became me and this chapter of the administration, to work on a renamings policy and develop some sustained educational programming around our campus's history. So we have put this into the strategic plan so that we would have it publicly available, transparent, hold ourselves accountable. And we've been working on the policy portion. We worked with John Wright, our history colleague, on events during the course of the year as the beginnings of the sustained educational programming. We are making funds available to hire an additional archivist and a public historian around this so that this can be also curricular and become part of programmatic area of study. And we're working on the policy at the same time. I had the policy in near final draft and was preparing to bring it forward when May 25th happened and George Floyd tragically died. And like many of us, that was a pause moment for me personally, and a lot of the people who'd been involved with crafting that policy did not feel complete in light of what we learned about ourselves after that incredible event and the days and weeks that followed. And so we're working on it more. I don't want the campus community to feel as if we've backburnered it. We haven't. It's actually an active review, but it's hard work and we want to get it right. And so we're taking our time on it. And I think you'll see a discussion about it at the October board meeting and then in future conversations. But and also it's going through consultation on campus. We're sort of working those through in parallel. And then the last piece of news that I want to give you is, you may have heard me mention in the last academic year, our efforts around student mental health and our concern there, and the fact that we needed to do more and get better. And if anything, I think the pandemic has probably exacerbated this issue and also made it harder to address because the ability to provide services is impacted by our remoteness. And so we have done several things in the short term, new telehealth opportunities, leveraging some of the technology that's available to provide support, doing programming to give students work to do. But we're also doing a summit that was originally scheduled for last spring that we're now doing October 22nd virtually in partnership with Minnesota State and the Private College Council around student mental health. There are breakout sessions for faculty. If you're interested, just let me know or email Meredith, who can get in touch with our office. However you normally would connect with our office, any way you'd like to, it will get to us and we'll find a way to get an invitation to you, or if you want to send a representative who would then report back. It's the first step of what we expect will be many steps to try to improve and contribute positively to our community's happiness and what that means for their and our success. So lastly, as I close, I want to make sure I stick to your time and respect your time. I'm really reminded these days of the words of our university's first president, President Falwell, who noted on his inauguration, and I quoted this in my own inaugural address, "We celebrate beginnings. Ours is the hopeful toil of the sower, not the consummate fruition of the harvest." And I find those words very inspiring. I did then, and I think they're even truer now. And I think like really timeless perspectives, they get truer and truer the longer we go. There's a lot of work to do. We are on a journey. The journey is pretty hard right now, I think, for everybody. I know we're really tired, and it is tiring also to not have an end in sight, but there will be an end, and I am absolutely convinced that we will emerge stronger as a result of it. I'm really looking forward to working with you towards that. I'm really inspired by the work that you're doing. I hope you see yourselves reflected in how we're trying to inspire our entire campus community. So I thank you for inviting me and for all you do for the University of Minnesota. And I'll stop there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, President Gabel, for your insightful address about the dynamic role of the University of Minnesota in the state of Minnesota, and especially for your reflections relating to the health, the sustainability in the agri-food, and where we as department are so engaged, but also very rightly said, so many partners in our campus are engaged in those areas. And we really hope to further connect and work with those, and then with oral partners outside of the university, including communities and stakeholders and constituents across the state. And a key message for me is inspired by the state, but world-class. I think that's a great leading motivation, which I distill from your talk. Thank you very much for spending your time with us. It's a privilege for us, for all of my colleagues and our students to host you in our department. And this is a very insightful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of your time together.
Thank you.
Bye.
Are we ready to move on?
So I'd like to welcome. So I'd like to welcome Dean Buhr, Al Levine, Elder Atum, and Dave Pascoe as a panel, which will be reflecting on many of the elements in the address of President Gabel, specifically on agriculture, on food, on health, on community, as far as the main pillars that drives our mission and by which we're active with our constituents. And we hope to have that impact, and we want to make that impact over our teaching with our students and over our research that is engaged at the state level, and as President Gabel mentioned, of world class, but really in that setting of the state of Minnesota, with the specific setting of agriculture, that food hub that was earlier mentioned in the previous panel, with the diversity of our communities, the ever-increasing diversity of our communities, and also of the health of our society and the individuals that make up our society. And I'm actually very grateful that Al Levine, a previous department head of food science and nutrition, is willing to moderate the session as well as contribute his insights to the discussion. So Al, could I hand it over to you?
Sure. Thanks so much, Joe. So as you heard from our president, the Minter section, I'll tell you, as a department head, as a dean, as a vice provost, and as a vice president, I found that there wasn't one corner of this university that didn't want to take credit for food. Every time there was an opportunity to get some funds around the area of food and nutrition, everybody was an expert. If you look at food history, if you look at culture, if you look at psychology, if you look at medicine, engineering, everyone. And as a nutritionist and spending a career at that, I can tell you that dealing with family and friends, they're all experts as well. Everybody eats, everybody has an opinion about food, everybody thinks there's a food that's good for them and a food that's not good for them. And no matter how much you study it and how much you work at it, your opinion counts only an iota towards their own experience with food in their lifetime. So today we're going to be talking and continuing on from where the president left us. We have 4 distinguished guests here today, or members of the university community as well. And I'm going to go in the order of our elder first, then the dean, then our advisory council member, and our department head can finish up the discussion. So I'd like to begin with Elder Atum. Atum Azzahir is president and executive director of the Cultural Wellness Center and has a Doctor of Literature degree that she received in 2007 and has trained a host of people over the years, has touched many corners of this earth with her knowledge, and I'm going to ask her to begin. Elder, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting me. I particularly want to thank Craig Hassel and the department staff and faculty and students who have been very much a part of the Cultural Wellness Center's work for actually many years now. I think we've been involved with Craig and many other of the faculty in the Department of Agricultural and Science, and just many students who have visited the Cultural Wellness Center. We are located in a part of the city that really talk about how many languages are spoken in the state. One of the schools near us, Anderson School, is really known for over 50 to 60 languages spoken in one school. So I think the president is correct that this is an opportune time for us to think about what are those values, what is the ancient wisdom, one of the terms that she used, what is the ancient wisdom that can be pulled from the very, very diverse cultural backgrounds, cultural knowledge, cultural ways of knowing that exist in community. I think what I heard with regard to this commitment now to a different way of relating to community, a different way of engaging in community, a way that is, I use the word different, but it's a way that now looks at one of the resources that every community member, as one of you have already said, can really use as a currency or things that we need. We do need to eat. But the thing that we need to eat most is food that's culturally familiar to us. Foods that we have not had to use as a way of resisting, but as food that we use as a way of building our lives, building our relationships, building our health, building, our connections to other people within and across culture. I don't think people have thought of food before. And I think the president was really clear that this is one of the ways that the university has been able to help us. One of the ways that we have been able to look at nutrition, the way we have been able to look at, in the case of this new project that we're doing, the way we've been able to look at what role does a nutritionist play or a dietitian play in our ability to address, for example, obesity, which might be widespread in our community, or cardiovascular disease, which really is widespread, or diabetes, which is widespread. These are all food-related, eating-related, the kind of habits that we have with food, where the relationship and the partnership that we have now with the students and with the faculty in the Department of Ag and with the dietary and nutritionists, we're beginning to share knowledge about what food has meant to us culturally. How do we not have to eat the foods that are left over, not have to eat the foods that are closely, that we can walk to get, because those very same foods that are convenient and close are not necessarily foods that's going to help us with the health challenges we have. What I like so much about the relationship now that is both being talked about by the president, by our faculty, and by those in the community is that this idea of food is a way of exchanging knowledge, the way of exchanging relationships and being in relationship, either in terms of our family history. We talk about culinary heritage. It gives us a chance to look at what are some of the good ways that food has given us the capacity to survive culturally. She mentioned, for example, 1918 and the influenza. And I remember my father was born in 1918 in a part of Indiana, and his mother died during the very period of time. So once again, there are so many ways that we can think through relationships with the university, with the faculty, and with whether it's food or food knowledge or food accessibility of food sustainability is really at the base of relationships. And I appreciate all that she said about that and the structure that comes in our relationship now with the faculty and students in the Department of Ed. So thank you. I appreciate being here.
Well, thanks for your thoughts. Those were very helpful. And Dean Buhr, we'd like to hear your thoughts about this intersection of food with everything else in the world. And you as an economist might know something about that.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it. I'm glad to be here. And I apologize. I arrived late on the scene. I had a conflict meeting with the provost, so I guess I can say I went to the provost instead of the president. But thanks for this. This is a really compelling session on two fronts. And yes, I'm an economist, but what's some people don't know is I've worked quite a bit in food security and hunger issues because I've been on the board of Second Harvest Heartland for many years. In fact, today is my first official day post board member. But to the question, you know, the relationship piece is really, really fascinating, I think, and I'll go off of what Elder Azzahir was just saying, and intersections, and the intersections between all people connected in this. And one of the big areas that I'm sure President Gabel talked about was, and sustainability comes up, but that linkage or that relationship between land and food and health. And, you know, we have a construct or program, right, you know, this idea of One Health. What happens with our soils affects the quality we're finding now. And I'll talk about the science sense, I guess, and how do we draw science into some of this as well. But what we're finding is that the health of our soils, the health of our water systems, the health of those directly impact not only, you know, people's health through those direct impacts, but also through, as we look at crops, for example, we find that we're changing the composition of literally of the grains we're growing because of changes in climate and changes in carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere and so on. And so we're starting to understand through science these relationships on the physical side of this, and then how does that come back into our communities and health of people. And so spending quite a bit of time on this notion that, you know, where our food comes from, how it's produced, what the underlying environmental consequences all lead up to that. And then how do we build that relationship, which I think is really critical, that there is a, you know, your point, Al, earlier about everybody has an opinion about food. And this pretty vast difference, and I'm not sure how else to put it, between how and where our food is produced and how and where our food is consumed. And how do we start to, at a large scale, and we were talking about the economics of it, and then depending on the social circumstances that people are in, the socioeconomic circumstances people are in relative to that. So you think about, agriculture talks about global food security as a place to start with, of how do you produce enough food to feed the world, but yet in the conversation about what is the relationship at the table with people and their cultures and dimensions of that are part of health. And that's really, really becoming an important part if we're going to, you know, bridge this this piece. How do we build those relationships between, you know, food production and some of its local foods, you know, type elements. You know, we've spent a lot of time. It sounds, and this is an economist view again, which is, as people tell me, very reductionist, but is, you know, in our work with food insecurity, one of the really fascinating things is, we think about it, I think about it as market evaluation, but just the differences and the diversity of food. And so, for example, one of the places earlier today, somebody was talking about 17% of students are food insecure. And one of the numbers that's most striking is some of the large, people don't think about it, some of the largest food insecure areas are suburban. In fact, I won't name a community, but one that probably most people would never think of. And it's mainly because of people's, you know, just their financial management. And then you look at other communities, some are ethnic communities, and reasons for food insecurity there. And the health aspects of it, Food RX is a program that was developed around how do we address health outcomes with food. So understanding what are those, and I'm talking very much from this, you know, the connecting the production, the distribution, the access and security of food to understanding what those needs are, is that intersection and what the values are that come with that.
Thanks. Good thoughts. and our advisory council member, Dave, from the community and the business viewpoint, and you as a PhD educated individual, what are your thoughts on this?
Thanks, Al. I have a holistic view. I like to take the broader view. It's interesting. We had a meeting earlier today, and Craig Hassel had pointed out to Keagan Ringling that Keagan did this kind of a larger view encompassing many different things, and I guess I would kind of echo some of the things that Keagan sees is bringing things together in a systems approach. We've talked about systems. The president talked about systems. There's integration of things. Dean Buhr has talked about the integration. So we're moving towards some of this digging down and reductionist thinking, but we're also stepping back and try to see the broader view, because we eat food, we don't eat nutrients, but it's very important to study those nutrients. But then we've also learning and hearing today about how food interacts with community and culture, right? So the whole food system is something to look at and step back and think about. And when you think about the food system, you want to think about defining, it's about production and process and distribution, and then actually the consumer end. So it's the whole portion of food and agriculture together. And there's a lot of people involved in that, right? Excuse me. So I think there's a lot of people. I think that brings together a lot of different communities. And wouldn't it be great if we could just live in a big potluck, right? Everyone could get together and bring their favorite food, and we could get all these communities together, and everyone could tell us about the history to their favorite recipe and where it came from, what it meant to their community, what it means to their family. And then I think we would really start learning about the health of people and the health of communities. People not only feeling secure in their homes and who they are and how they connect with their community, but also that health aspect of how they interact and maybe needing to go to the doctor. But I think health is so much bigger. The food system is so much bigger, right? And broader than just the reductionist pieces. So I think there's opportunity for food science and nutrition as well as CFANS to position itself in thinking in a systems approach, in this larger integrated approach. Systems thinking allows us to think in these broader ways. It's not replacing anything. We wouldn't have to remove the current knowledge and the way we think about problems and how we solve problems, but it allows us to build upon problem solving and how we can think in the larger context of a food system, because it's a big thing, right? We have, excuse me, problems with globalization and things growing and everything being connected globally. The weather is obviously an issue that we have to deal with now. It seems to be getting a little more severe when we do have a storm. And this population growth, and we've already heard about food security. So how do we create availability? How are people utilizing things? So just trying to take all this in, if we can move towards maybe a systems approach, we can start seeing more of these problems and understanding the interaction between individual places within the food system.
Thanks so much, Dave.
Yep.
And from our department head, what do you think? Obviously, you're running a department that essentially is a food system. So there you go. Let's hear your thoughts.
It's a food system. Actually, it would even be more modest. We're just a very small part of a food system, because it's actually one of the elements from the address by President Gabel, where she said that these key areas of health, sustainability, and agro-food, that, as she reflects, it comes all together in food science and nutrition. So we're very much inspired by that part of the mission, but also an observation from her, which I think is very, very true, is that actually the very many groups and departments and schools in our university now engaged with diverse aspects of it. So what I would see for food science and nutrition is that we're not two closed scientific disciplines, food science and nutrition, but that we rather that open interface with a range of disciplines which extend from, on one hand, the engineering side, to the natural sciences, to the life sciences component, to the health sciences, to community, the interface with the community and learning from the communities, and seeing this also this more holistic approach towards the food system as being advocated. So I think the food science and nutrition department is truly an interface, should be an open interface where scholars, where students, where stakeholders can interact, constituents can interact around these central themes that are relating to health, sustainability, and agri-food. And of course, we bring in then our specific competencies in the food science area, in nutrition and dietetics. But I would very much emphasize the system-wide impact, but also that we need to listen and to work together with scholars, with community members, with individuals from very diverse settings to shape this experience and to be able to address these very multifaceted issues that we're confronted with, and that with a monodisciplinary approach you just cannot solve. But you need these individual disciplines to come together always in this diverse setting and to really see how we can contribute to specific areas to really help further an element of sustainability, of preserving community values, enhancing health, etc. All the major societal issues come together in this field of food science and nutrition. That in a nutshell would be my view on food science and nutrition. It's really an open and dynamic interface for these issues in the university, but with a very, very open mind towards our society and the constituents, specifically in the state of Minnesota and beyond. I still recall one message from the president. It's the place is Minnesota, but we want to do world-class teaching, research, and outreach and extension. And we are in a unique location in Minnesota with the diversity of our communities in our setting in a specific agricultural zone to actually engage on this multi-faceted endeavors. We have many challenges, but we also have very many opportunities, and it's going to be really an exciting journey.
Okay, thanks. So everybody's saying something similar in that way, that we have this system with integration between it. But let's take something specific. We're dealing with a pandemic right now. And we know that people with obesity, for example, are at a higher risk. We know that vitamin D seems to play a role, even though it's a hormone and not really a vitamin. And we enrich our foods with it or supplement our foods with it. So it gives you an idea of how, even with our pandemic, our food systems. So I'd like to hear from the elder in terms of the community, when you're talking to people in specific cultural groups, what their concerns are on the intersection between their health, their food, and this virus that's causing all sorts of grief in our communities.
It's a great question. So let me talk just about my own personal experience and that of my husband, who is diabetic. I, at this point in my life, we are in our 70s. And so what we have found with the pandemic is that everything that we didn't have to quite pay as much attention to prior to the pandemic, we have to pay attention to now. For example, we have to make sure that we pay very, very, very close attention to whatever the kind of diabetic, his blood sugar levels and all of the things that he eats. Eating has now become medicine even more for us. How do we eat and at the same time enjoy, relationship, which is what we've always thought of food as doing. We think about food as medicine, and now here we are having to really look at it as the possibility of it kind of being a poison if we don't eat right, if we don't eat at the right time of the day, if we don't pay attention to, just checking on ourselves as it relates to how we are feeling based on what we eat. All of those things have a part in what he and I are really studying as it relates to how food is important, what we eat and how we eat and how we feel is all connected. So I think that you're bringing it up is really good. We both are at risk, as is stated, but at the same time, we reduce that risk. And really, believe it or not, a lot of the way we reduce it is through what we eat, how we eat, when we eat, and who we eat with. So that's our personal experience at this point. And we're staying healthy, healthier, you know, through this idea again that we have to pay attention to our nutrition.
Well, it's the good news from a viewpoint of a food safety program. It doesn't seem as though the virus is being transmitted through any kind of foodborne illness or anything of that sort. So that's the good news. But in terms from a dean's perspective, and from somebody who knows this whole field of agriculture so well, Brian, what do you think about the pandemic and the intersection with food? You have to unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Yeah, well, it has, you know, in a sense, as Elder was talking about it, the heightened awareness of our food and its importance, I think, is a big key part of this. And it's something as simple as I was intrigued by the where we eat and how we eat part of that, where and what I was saying earlier before my mute was off was there's sort of this dichotomy. It's kind of amazing that during a pandemic and all the disruption we had, that for the most part, there was a relatively short period of disruption in food availability. There was a period where people were concerned about access to food. And largely that, from the standpoint of us being concerned, are we going to have the ability to distribute and process, manufacture, and move food forward, wasn't an issue. At the same time, we saw how much that affected just the simple thing. It's fascinating. I had an opportunity to talk with several larger companies in the meantime, because they were working a little bit of food science on some of these issues of how do we change ingredients. You dramatically shifted because of the processed levels of foods. You know, it's not the simple, you know, nutritious foods, it's the other side of that. And the change from retail going from restaurants to grocery stores did have an impact on how we obtain food. And so I think through the pandemic, we've again learned about the importance of our local food systems, how we think about where we're processing and producing food and the healthfulness of those foods. That point is, I think we see that with all response to COVID. But it's really going to be interesting to see, you know, there's an opportunity within this to learn from that and adapt to it if that holds true. And thinking about how do we, a lot of interest in local, as we call them, simple foods, eating carrots and so on, rather than the processed foods. And I think this highlights that for a lot of people.
So I'm going to ask Dave the question, because from a person who's been out in the business community a great deal and more recently than some of us, what do you think?
I think the pandemic definitely exposed our supply chains. I think most of us are well aware of that. That was a big problem. A lot of our supply chains, I used the term globalization earlier. A lot of our supply chains were getting raw materials from around the globe. It's creating problems, not just in the food systems, also in others. So I think most companies had to scramble and think about how they were going to change things. E-commerce obviously took off big. Companies that had a small e-commerce grew their e-commerce business, right? It was a way for them to stay afloat, and they have to stay afloat, right? They have to sell products to be able to keep people employed, be part of the community, continue to do those things. So yeah, there was a big effect on businesses and how it affects businesses. So I think that's a big learning lesson in how we move forward. I think some of these lessons will stick around, and there will be a push to more local economies.
Yeah, so unfortunately our time's coming to an end, so I'd like our department head to give the last 1 minute of comments. We should have had a couple hours on this topic.
We definitely can, and I also want to announce that actually this is setting the stage. We'll have further events in half a year and a year from now, which go more in depth. We'll have more time to go in depth in the individual topics. Maybe one reflection now with the pandemic and food. It really points out that food, of course, is a nutrient, and we need to eat balanced, and we need to eat healthy and unprocessed as much as possible. But there's very much a key thing as well. Food is also very much playing that social role. And I think we're lacking that. You know, we're maybe now with a family or with just a very few individuals. Many people are eating alone. to me that food that serves its role of social cohesion, creating those and maintaining those interrelationship over a dinner or in whatever different setting. So we really realize really that these holistic aspects, being together as humans in a social setting, and the social cohesion that also food brings, and our food traditions. And I think we see really that, you know, we're in some kind of experiment, and suddenly that is being cut off for 95%. So, and I think that to me again signifies this wider importance of role, the more holistic view of role of food in our lives and in our relationships in society.
Great. Well, this was a good session. Like I said, I wish we had more time, but I thank everybody for their time. And the spotlight will continue now. Thank you. Are we ready? Okay. Elder, can you see me and hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. Well, I just first want to say, picking up on the relationship piece that President Gabel spoke of, I just want to acknowledge how important our relationship has been to me over the past 15 years. Many people don't realize that I study at the Cultural Wellness Center as a fellow, and the Cultural Wellness Center is a knowledge-producing institution. And I get an opportunity to listen to people from the African American community, and actually a lot of residents in South Minneapolis, talk about various issues. And the opportunity to listen and learn from the community is so important to me. And your mentorship and guidance has really helped me develop as a person and as a professional in ways that I otherwise would not have been able to do. And so I want to express my gratitude to you for that right off the bat.
Thank you.
I want people to know that the Cultural Wellness Center is a co-owner of the Midtown Global Market down in South Minneapolis. And you have a health hub down there that is a wonderful project, the Backyard Initiative Health Hub, that has been funded with partnership through Alina in the Cultural Wellness Center for about 12 years now.
Yes.
And I'd like you to speak about the work that has gone on in that context around the neighborhood nutrition program of South Minneapolis. And I'd like you to speak however you'd like to about the work and the history of that, and then how that has come to fruition with our university students.
Well, Craig, thank you so much. Once again, I think that because of the relationship that we've been in existence for now 25 years, and because of the relationship that we've had with the University School of Public Health and the School of Science and Nutrition, and now the dietary students, we we have survived to a higher degree in terms of our mission of unleashing the power of citizens to heal themselves and build community. And what that unleashing is about is it's about people being confident that they have knowledge, that they do have culture, but that culture brings with it knowledge. I think often when we talk about cultural groups, we think about despair and the victimization and the abuse and pain and so forth that we have all experienced, and the deficits, because there are so many needs that get talked about all the time. But what I think this particular work has done with Alina is to reveal that there is knowledge, there's wisdom, there are ways of knowing, there are skills and assets that people have that when given a chance, when the space is created, they actually will find, and Alina can attest to that, they'll find knowledge and that they can use. I mean, Alina worked with us to ask people about sickness and disease and came up with a definition of health that way back in 2008, we were able to look at the World Health Organization's definition of health and really work with it. So community members who were in the program with the Backyard Initiative and Alina were able to adapt that. Alina then adopted that definition of health and they use it throughout the system. And that definition of health includes relationships. It includes things beyond the physical condition. It's not just the absence of disease, but it has to do with vision, working relationships that people need to have with each other. It has to do with community and aspirations and visions. And so that definition of health became a part of what the community was able to bring. Alina adopted it, and then it spread throughout, and then became a part of what the state of Minnesota back then also incorporated into the definition of health. So health, I think, has been defined by the community engagement efforts. And we always go back to say it was the relationship and the partnership between the Culture Wellness Center, our small organization, and Alina Health System, this huge organization. And we I want to make it known today that without the students in the School of Public Health, without the students in the Center of Spirituality and Healing, without the students, from the University of Minnesota and the School of Science and Agriculture, none of that would really have been as effective and as well carried through and followed through as it was. I think where we are now as it relates to food. Food has been one of the invisible resources that we've used over the years that we've been working on this Backyard Initiative. Every single gathering, every single event, every single dialogue and is in the context of dinner. We call it dinner, dialogue, and connections. We ask people to come to have a discussion with us, and we bring with that then what is food that brings with it memory, food that brings with it something to talk about. It's a conversation starter. Food that is prepared by hands, food that is cooked, food that is beautiful, food that is inspirational, and always food that is available for people to use while they're with us, but also to carry home to their family and to their children. We always have food prepared. We never serve food that is packaged or come from the fast food places around us, because preparation of food in itself also has a perception by people who know you're preparing the food, a memory knowing the food is prepared just for them, and this kind of transmission of love and this transmission of kinship that and memories in particular that is carried through the food. I think that we are just learning that that practice is indeed a practice that now is beginning to be talked about, studied, and as a matter of fact, tested and researched. This practice of bringing food to every single thing we do. At one point, I think we, as community members, thought that because the funding, whether it was from local nonprofits or philanthropy, or from the state, or from other resources, never allowed you to prepare food, never paid for the food. And so we had to, in many, many cases, prepare our own foods and bring them in. But now what is happening is that food has become an essential part of community engagement, especially as it relates to cultural groups and cultural communities. So what's happening now with food, in the case of your department, the Department Dietary and the Department of Science and Agriculture, we are now looking at ancient grains for the African, and we have this amazing initiative that basically is co-created with the staff, with the professor, with the students, graduate students, as a matter of fact, who are doing the research on the ancient grains, bringing it forward to the entrepreneurs over at the Midtown Global Market, and really working with the entrepreneurs to incorporate many of the ancient grains into the recipes, into the menus, into the meals that's going to be served through the restaurants. I think that what's happening with the students is because they are working with, as I said, community people, elders, people who have been a part of this kind of initiative in North Minneapolis, because the students are now beginning to see that the knowledge that they gain, the resources that is provided, that really comes through the dialogue, that is knowledge and that it's being infused into the curriculum. And the curriculum is actually being impacted by the knowledge exchange, by the ideas, by the history, by the culinary heritage that is being brought. Oh, thank you. This is an example of the team. So it's really the ancient grains are coming to Midtown Global Market. This is a picture of the students, of the chef, Robert, who is the chef, Lynn, Melissa, Miss Roberta, who is an amazing manager of this whole project. And you'll see that African rice and millet and sorghum, which I grew up with, and teff, these are things that are now being introduced to the to not just the community and the community members who will be part of the health hub, not just those community members and members of the Cultural Wellness Center, but this is being introduced through the restaurants in the Midtown Global Market, and will be shared through the meals that are now being prepared and delivered to residents of the community. So it is, we are now referring to it as neighborhood nutrition, which is often in the gatherings, in the restaurants, in the delivery of foods that the restaurants are going to be offering to their customers, and to students who are going to be coming within our health hub to both spend time in the Midtown Global Market, but also the students, as you can see, the students from the university. So I think I'll stop there and see, Craig, if you want to add some things. I think that we are mostly proud of the fact that the students' testimony to us and the comment they make to us is that they are learning, building relationships, and increasing the curriculum that they use in their courses at the university.
Well, thank you for that. I do want to just reinforce the idea that our students are able to get actual experience working in the community down at the Midtown Global Market. And we had a cohort of 12 students last academic year working under the guidance and direction of Miss Roberta. And those students all indicated that there's an experiential piece that they get from their time down at the Midtown Global Market and working with the models of community engagement that the Cultural Wellness Center owns and works with in South Minneapolis that they otherwise would not get. And as a result of that direct experience, 5 of those students were awarded summer internships and actually did some of that grounding work for the Ancient Grains project. And so we see this as a real opportunity to provide some experience that fills some gaps in our curriculum in terms of what dietitians have traditionally been introduced to in terms of their training and professional preparation. And these kinds of community-based experiences give them a sense of engagement, interaction, and through the work of Miss Roberta, an opportunity to really learn to appreciate how to interact in a productive way across cultures that bring, in some cases, very different systems of thought. And so the students are learning how to adapt culturally to different contexts. And that's a very powerful transferable skill that we're just now trying to introduce within our food science and nutrition curriculum. So I want to thank you for that opportunity. Are you there? She's there. So I'm not sure if you can hear me. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the work, the neighborhood nutrition work going on in South Minneapolis, Elder?
I think that the Midtown Global Market has been such a location for local farm gardening resources. Also, many of the farmers, the cultural groups who do farming, will bring their products, to the market. We do the growing around the market in very small containers. Ms. Roberta is working with the students. They have the once again, the vendors in the market in particular have been so moved by the changes that they are making in their recipes. Everything from offering sugar-free drinks, offering vegetables, which they didn't offer as much fruits and vegetables in their menus before. I think there's all kind of ways right now that Midtown Global Market is becoming mentioned before, a hub, a health hub, but it's also a food distribution. And we're beginning to use the term culinary heritage more because that term also gives the different cultural groups an opportunity to see what's happening both within the African American as well as in the indigenous community. I think I get poems from people that tell me that food is a symbol of survival. Food is a reassurance that the body everything is going to be all right in the body. I wrote some of these down because they were so beautiful. They talked about food as an inspiration, as a symbol of the capacity to create and finish a journey that you've started. There's an ongoing role that food is going to play not anymore in resistance, but in recovery. And people say food is, I quote them saying, food was a symbol of resistance before because it was not available, that it was taken from you. And now it's becoming a symbol of inspiration because we're making it available in more, the farming in people's yards, the growing of vegetables in real close local places. Having the grocery stores begin to offer very specific foods for cultural groups that people can find that has been brought, once again to the grocery stores that's more accessible to them. And so all of this is the kind of story that people are saying at the Midtown Global Market with the different cultural groups who come in, with the assistance, once again, of us naming things. Because as I said before, sometimes we're doing this, but we don't know what to call it. And I think this study and the relationship between the students, the faculty, and the elders is really causing us to really name things and be able to distribute it. So neighborhood nutrition is becoming a part of, as someone said before, social cohesion, social interaction, and health promotion. So we appreciate that because it's really giving us all a chance to see that during this particular time that seems so hard, we are discovering and creating ways to get together. And food is a significant part of that, as well as nutrition and nurturing.
Well, thank you. I just want to bring up one last point. President Gabel talked about, on one hand, this tension between a sense of place and community, and on the other hand, world-class and world-class institution. And it raises the question for me, can we find world-class within our local community? And I think that there's an example here of how we can do world-class work right here in our local communities. And I really, really appreciate the effort and the strength that the Cultural Wellness Center brings to work with our students, to work with myself and our faculty. And I just want to say we look forward to a very productive, resourceful, and fruitful future with you at the Cultural Wellness Center. So thank you so much for your time. I know that you had a very important event in your institution today, and so we really appreciate you spending time with us.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Craig.
Okay, you take care.
You too. Thank you.
Okay.
So this brings us to the end of the first day of the Food Science and Nutrition 2020 showcase. We're in a very difficult situation with the pandemic. We have this little nucleus of in-person presence, safely, socially distanced, etc., which gives a bit of maybe the old feeling to the meeting. But 95% of the people have been joining remotely. So that's difficult. On the other hand, it also, as we see today, creates great opportunities. We're connecting to different groups. We can set up different type of settings and conversations and discussions, which will be much more difficult to pull off in a different manner, in an in-person manner. So I'd like to really thank all who have been so active in bringing their point of view here to the table from this very, very, very diverse perspective that all come together in food science and nutrition, and really start to articulate where, as a department, we can start to engage for our teaching and actually are working together with the students in in the diverse setting, including the communities and in the various avenues that our students will pursue for their career, for our research and scholarship. And it is a holistic, more general type of conversation. But also I'd like to point out that tomorrow we have a second session where we'll go in more depth in some of these areas. And last but not least, I would really like to emphasize many of our students actually have taken the effort to prepare a little virtual type of poster. So I'd really like to recommend you to go to our event website, because you will find fascinating posters about the research of our students, and really spend some time there, because you will see how they start interacting in their specific projects with some of the themes that we've been discussing here today, and we will also be discussing tomorrow. And then at the end, it's the last where we actually will be in person. Tomorrow will be completely virtual. So I think already halfway through the event, it's the moment here to actually thank all those who've been so instrumental in organizing this event. In our department, Therese Liverick as the main coordinator, she's gone at great lengths to make this happen and pull us in. And she did an outstanding job there. I'm very amazed at how these things actually are materializing under these very special conditions. And you know, this is a transformational type of event. Then also Drew Carter and Sarah Cannon, who've been giving a lot of background support, and Drew also with the website in collaboration with Emeritus from the college, and the technical staff here at the Center of Continuing Education. So thank you very much all for your engagement in making this happen. Under stress, things get fluid. We normally would have our showcases. They go well. Now we can't do it. And under these very difficult conditions, we have a completely new format, which really allows us to interact I must say, for me, it's in a fascinating setting. Thank you very much all for making this happen. And I hope to see you, many of you, tomorrow again in our next part of the meeting. And don't forget all these posters on the event website. They're very interesting. So please have a look. Thank you. Have a good evening. Stay safe, stay healthy.